Question was, did you keep the Tory ritual? Yes. Yes, I did. Yes, I did peep that. What do I think of it? Well, the first thing everybody should have realized from the door is the fact that Tory was never on trial against Meg the Stallion. Everybody knows that, right? When you read the actual court case, it says the state of California versus Tory Lanez. China. China, yeah. And basically, what that said, or what it was three main charges. And all of the charges were specifically about the discharging of the gun. None of the charges was about shooting her. The fact that she was shot was incidental. That was just the cover dressing that they used to get everybody away from what they was actually setting up, which was a play to get him and tie him specifically to the gun. Understand? So because none of his DNA and none of that was actually found on the weapon, and because they had no direct witness to tie him to the weapon shooting, it basically came out that the girl shot her, allegedly. But that's what it basically said. Because she had got the immunity and they talked all around the person who shot them, it was the lawyer's responsibility to bring the ambiguousness around the gun and tie it directly to Kelsey. Everything was there to do it, but they didn't do it. They kept trying to go in against Meg. And she only testified like on the first or second day. Everything else was in the bottom. So while everybody is trying to do the shit in the court of public opinion, he actually is getting railroaded because nobody is paying attention to what the charge actually is. You see what I'm saying? So the fact that yes, none of his DNA and all that was next to the gun, but because they were able to get somebody to actually tie him to the gun, and because they didn't hammer the fact that it was inconsequential when it came to him, but it was more likely it was her, and then play up the fact that she's taking the fifth to basically say that she did it, not to incriminate herself. What else do you need? So it was basically a wrap from there. See what I'm saying? Know your argument, know what you're there to do, who you're talking to. And then because you had so much, like I said, of the actual shit that had been out there, it was good that he never said nothing. But at the same time, the shit that they needed to say, it seemed nobody did. And thus, you know what I mean? Here we are. And plus, I felt like once I saw Desiree Perez there, who was OG Juan Perez's wife, who are the two most prolific snitches in the 20th century. It seems that they took down mad cartels and were able to integrate them into the United States intelligence services. I figured, you know what I'm saying? They did it. The fix was already in.
So it says, Paul, how do we collect what's owed to us? The USA owns us as Moors. No, the USA doesn't own
anything. The government doesn't own any land. It holds all of its equity and property in trust. What we're dealing with is belligerent trustees that don't want to come off of their duty because they have worked in concert to make everybody minors, not minors in age, but minors in terms of the age of majority in which they can actually take control of the said trust that the United States has been controlling. You know what I'm saying? So it's not that, it's the fact that after a certain time, there was a successive wave of coup d'etats, the last being the one in after they sank the Titanic, in which the last people who were working against the uh, the establishment of the Federal Reserve were taken out. And once they were taken out, they were now subject to whatever financial uh, slavery that the people were put under. Last week, we went into how that actually happened in terms of the severing of the several states, meaning all of those states that were Moorishly governed basically walked out of the Congress, and that's what led to the Civil War because they didn't agree with the Northern uh, protocols that were being trying to be blanketed over everybody. It's the same thing with people always saying America is a democracy. It's not. See what I'm saying? It's a constitutional republic. You see what I'm saying? That has checks and balances for all equities and aspects of government. The reason why they don't like the Second Amendment that holds you having guns is not the fact that you're having guns, it's because the very fact that you have guns is to protect you from the government. So the government put things, so the Constitution has things in line that if the government was to ever become tyrannical, the people have the right to overthrow it because they are armed. So the Second Amendment has nothing to do with you carrying guns, you doing this. The very aspect of that amendment is for you as a citizen to defend yourself against the so-called government that if it ever became tyrannical, you have the means of preparing a militia to take back and do what you need to do. No other country has that. You understand what I'm saying? Like no other country in the world has that. So that should very tell you something that it couldn't have been all white people who were trying to do that. Meaning that it couldn't have been white folk who was owning people at the time solely and then decided that, God forbid, they ever became tyrannical against themselves, they would be able to arm themselves and they slaves against their government. Why would they do that? Why would they make a law to strip their own self from power? Does that make sense? And why would they enshrine it in the very second article, like Second Amendment? Like it's right there. Excuse me, the first, you know what I'm saying? The amendment dealing with holding the guns. You have the right to bear what type of arm. It says arms. So whatever arms that is. So what they try to do is say, well, when they said arms, they couldn't possibly have imagined assault rifles, blah, blah. It don't matter. It's arms. Anything that you put in your arm, in your hand to defend yourself is protected. You understand? By the very same thing that they trying to get you to be against. They're not telling the cops to give up the guns. They're not telling the army to give up the guns, but they want you to do it. No, because you have more guns than all of them combined. The people just in America have more guns than all of the fantastic weapons and guns that they got. Do you understand? There are people who generationally have what they call gun trusts, where they pass, where the trust is the owner of the gun. That's how we're supposed to be rolled. The trust is the owner of the gun, and the guns are passed down to the trustees, who are the people doing the gun. So God forbid anything happen, you'd have to sue the trust for the gun, because that's privately protected. You understand? And there's people who have stuff like that, and then have just, and every generation add on to the cache of weapons and stuff that they already got from the last generation. So imagine every generation, imagine from the time when you was 2, some of these white people be going early. Imagine from when you was 2 to 25, every year you get like 8 guns, 10 guns, and store them with the 8 and 10 guns that your pops had been storing since he was 2, and the ones that he inherited from his pops from when he was 2, and the guns that he inherited from his pops from when he was 2. You understand? That's why they're still scared of the people. That's the only reason why. They haven't ran on and done certain things like they really wanted to do, because they don't know how. You can't determine the revolution. That's why they try to create fake ones. That's why they try to create color revolutions and stuff, to be able to manipulate the people to thinking that they're following the people who are really living in freedom, and all of these people are really just paid agents and stuff, or actors. See, it's better to instill one. Remember remember Albert Pike said, he said, we, all of their heroes, we'll choose them for them. So they'll always be loyal to us, because they have taken upon it themselves to accept the fact that they believe that we as regular humans are here to serve them in whatever means they see necessary, even if it means death. Because they believe that their little group is the chosen people. You understand? Because their Messiah is the one, their Messiah is everybody else's Antichrist. You understand? That's why they can't win. So because they can't win, they have to win now. Because they can't ultimately win, they still, under the ebb and flow, have to know what it's like to win. That's why even though they're winning, they're losing. See what I'm saying? Remember, you're dealing with people who prayed to their God to forgive them for the lies that they're going to tell in the year before. So before the year even come in, like right now, before they doing it, they making alms to their God, who is the devil, to forgive them for all of the lies that they'll tell in the year to come. Thereby, in their mind, negating the karma, the future karma of the conscious evil that they will be initiating in that year to come. So you see the thing with the people, they get the chicken, they wave the chicken around their head before they walk into the synagogue. You ever seen that? With a dude with a small hat is holding the chicken, and he waves it around everybody's head before they walk in. Seen that, right? Go and look at the Yoruba people. They got the same ritual. They do the same thing. And then the last one in is the one that cuts the chicken open, because what they've done is that they put the spell or the ritual sin for the year on the chicken. So however many people come into the synagogue, come into the thing that day, whoever's the last one in who kills the chicken, they count how many people is in there, and then they do that in terms of how many prayers they'll do. So if he's the 230th, then they do 230 prayers before they cut the chicken open, and then they do the sacrifice. Understand? So you're dealing with people who are practicing a certain degree of precognitive bio equations by using inferior matters as energy, as an energy transference. Understand? That's high science. Get this book called Voodoo, the Quantum Leap. Get that book, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. In terms of how voodoo and all digital computation, anything like that comes from so-called African cosmology, based on the ancient bone abacuses and stuff we was using. You know what I'm saying? Because the people that we're dealing with on the day-to-day are just the vessels that are holding, you see what I'm saying, the fountain of energy or whatever that can't die. So everybody talks about the time that Leopold, for instance, went into Congo and did all he did. But a lot of people don't ask why that happened. Well, this happened at the time of what they call new imperialism. You know what I'm saying? In which the so-called old black monarchs in them had left the the uh the English, or what you would call the European monarchies, in the stead of their Freemasonic servants. And the servants then basically ceased to recognize them as landowners and basically blackmailed them to stay. In which now the areas that they were going to colonize would be administered through the white looking people. Similar Stephen Django Carl Candy situation. And so they, because they looked like the people there, they basically were the ones brutalizing these Africans, because technically they were really Europeans, the ones that they were, the so-called Africans they were sending over to them. So when you see pictures in the Congo of the dudes with the feathers and these idiots on the tapes be talking about, oh, look what the Moors was doing and all that. None of them peoples was Moors. How do we know that? Because they were all Swahili speakers. All the Moors were in the West. The Northwest, meaning North Africa, Western Africa, and then over here in America. Just because you put a fez on, don't mean that you're a Moor, especially if it's Mark. Just because I put on a Batman costume, don't make me Bruce Wayne. You understand? And if I go fight crime, that don't mean I'm a crime fighter. It's the same thing with them. They just put these hats on these niggas, they put the mark on it, and they went out there and brutalized them. But they did that also because there was a prophecy about the old Congo based upon the ancient, you know, origins of that area. You know what I'm saying? And how unexplored but mineral rich it was. But you have whole other life forms in that area that had not fully been explored to the point that they had to send somebody up in there. But to do that, they had to first make contact. You know what I'm saying? So there you go. Uh, so this dude was one of the dudes they sent out there,
And nobody would have known this, but they just found this nigga's film a couple of years ago. He did. But he was an explorer on behalf of them people. On behalf of them people. Anyway, this dude right here. Everybody see your screen? You see what's on your screen? Okay, cool. So the dude on the right, that's the white man. This is how they was doing them Congolese people out there. They was using them for postcards. They was using them, turning them into shoes. They was doing all types of crazy stuff. They was wild in the Belgian Congo. They really went totally savage, hedonistic, almost beyond satanic. But that's because a lot of them, like I said, these ones right here are here on behalf of that. This little kid here is probably this. These are probably the sons or the children of the so-called black monarchs that's being exiled over here and then being put under these white people. And then these white people's basically using their power to then use other so-called blacks they import to then brutalize the native Congolese. This is one of the explorers they sent in, okay? And nobody knew what happened to him. So years later, they went and they found his what do you call that? His film, just like in the movie. So this was some of the stuff that he was finding out there. You know what I'm saying? So they finding all of this stuff. They also going deep, getting more rubber, and then they doing more and more. How do you say excavations, and they finding this type of stuff. See how George Lucas and them took the Star Destroyer from yeah, it's because see the Congo is when they think the jungle or the deep bush, that's the Congo. You know what I'm saying? There are no jungles in America. There's rainforests. You know what I'm saying? We got that, but no, there's no uh jungle. So when they talking about the jungle, they're talking about the deep. Excuse me, the jungles is in America, but when you talking about Congo and all that, talking about the deep, deep bush. You know, that. See, right? So they finding all of this stuff. They just found this stuff. Okay, let me go back. So they over there and they finding that. So they are over there because before all of the invasion, before they went in there and do what they was doing, they got wind that there was these fantastical people out there, and they live in these like a prophecy that there's going to be some heavy technology, people, energy, whatever coming out of this place, specifically at the Congo. So they decided they needed to go in there earlier. So after the Belgian thing, the Black Belgians went in, but as they were gone, like I said, this is when the first coup d'etat of Black Europeans happened. Well, the latest one happened after that, but they boxed them out. So now they had to stay in these areas, even though they're from Europe. They now got to blend in with the natives, but because of this secret relationship, they're able to be like the overseers and shit like that. See what I'm saying? But when it came time for education, their firstborns would be sent back to Europe for education because they're Europeans. Well, that's the tradition in Africa today, right? Don't they send all of their children to Europe to go to school? In hopes that they'll come back. Right? That's what all Africans do. They go to Europe because that was the tradition set up back then. So half of another reason why they're there is to be able to capitalize on whoever or whatever energy or whoever this person's supposed to be, who's going to eventually stop them from doing stuff. And they bank in Europe, right? So yeah, so this is two of the things they got out in there. And it was this. Well, show this. You know what I'm saying? This is what was out there. What's probably still out there. Look at it. What was this? What is this? What was this? Whatever it was huge. See the dude right here walking on it on the top. Whatever it was, fought or whatever, and then died, and then it's like the jungle grew up around it. This, I don't know what this is. This is some sort of creature, sort of little creature. So as the exploitation in the Congo became so, exploitative, it attracted other European, to come through who are now partaking in the same exercise, in which now they are now vying for dominance over the newly taken over regions in Europe that they control, and then at the same time are benefited from the colonial relationship of the exiled so-called black monarchs who are now living there as the overseers in the situation to keep the whole enterprise going. Why do you think at the end of the so-called colonial period, which ended like in the 60s, 70s, how come all the African presidents and stuff was all married to Caucasian women from Europe, from royal families? Anybody know that? People like Cindy Breakspear, who wound up, who come from the line of the Breakspears of the paper bloodline, who wound up becoming junior godmother because she had a baby with Ali Selassie, aka Victor Emmanuel's son, Robert Nesta. Okay? Then they say his pops was a plantation owner. So you saying they had plantations in Jamaica in the 60s, in the 50s? That's what you saying? Niggas was picking cotton in Jamaica in the 60s?
Late 50s, that's what y'all saying? So this is the whole thing. So you can see this and see where they get so much of the science fiction movies, stuff like that, for the different alien races and all that, because it's always us, because we're the aliens to them. You dig what I'm saying? So this is going on. They going crazy with the rubber and all that, murdering, slaughtering, raping, pillaging. So up until let's say the 50s, then Patrice Lumumba come in and he like, nah, man, we gotta switch all of this up. We getting the CIA out, we getting everybody out. And so they went to the extent of not killing, just killing him. They liquefied him, same way they allegedly did Nat Turner. So I think that's like a honor for like a heavy type of enemy, one enemy where they can't really, they gotta get you on the ultimate spirit. They gotta like ingest you when you feel it, because they thought that he. See if I got any more pictures. They thought that he was the dude who was predicted to come and shut them down. You understand what I'm saying? They thought it was him. And he was. He was one of them. But he died. You know what I'm saying? This was some sort of animal. I bet if we just sat here and just really looked at every inch of these pictures, we would see different things, different people. Reminds me of the man thing. It's a character they have called the man thing that exists. They just did a TV show with it. So these things, or this area, is one of the areas, you know, heavy areas that they mine, not just for that, but for bio treasures. You see what I'm saying? There you go. Look, this the man thing, right? And then this is this thing. Look at this thing. The man thing on the left, and then the Congolese thing on the right. You tell me what's going on. Yeah, man thing, swamp thing, yeah. Definitely not human. Whatever it is, it's not it's not human. Whatever that is. So imagine now this is the white man, he coming through seeing all of this. And look at the people. Like these people I'm showing you, they wasn't enslaved, these people. These people got vines and shit growing out of they abdomens. Nobody's enslaving these blacks. They got rockets and thrown over technology, like I don't know what this stuff. So naturally, by like I said, the 50s, the CIA ran up in there and tried to, Operation Shutdown. Not only it, because now that the Belgians were gone, they now had the jurisdiction to come in there and finish up. And Patrice Lumumba wasn't having it. They had to keep the Congolese people perpetually off guard by setting off a series of psychological operations over the years that eventually led to the Rwanda, the whole thing happened, spilled over from Congo to Rwanda, the whole Hutu Tutsi thing, because they're two different, I'm going to say species, but two different spatial groups. Just because they melanated don't mean that they are exactly the same genetic. They're not. So-called Africa has one of the largest aspects of genetic diversity in the entire world, right? Because the white man is racist and because Negroes go by what the white man say is science, they look over or gloss over the scientific fact that, as I said, the highest rate of genetic diversity in the entire world can be found in the African so-called continent amongst different groups of African peoples, because genetically they are distinct of each other. They all just not the same. So if you want to find the tallest person in the world, go to Africa. You find the shortest person in the world, go to Africa. You want to find the darkest person in the world, go to Africa. You want to find the lightest person in the world, the whitest person in the world, you don't go to Europe, go to Africa. You see what I'm saying? You want to find the oldest, where the Chinese people came from, Chinese people today, as you see them in China, where they come from, the same people in Africa, the Khoisan, right? Who themselves was regated by the so-called Africans as color, based upon their ancient inheritance and ancient genetic trace in those areas. They was there before the Zulus, before Shaka, before all of them, and they was always light skinned. You know what I'm saying? They didn't just become light. It's not you don't live in the desert and then become lighter. They just was always like that. And then a portion of them moved up through India and then from India up into China, adding to the other distinct lines out there, like the Dravidians and the original Manchu and all of that. But anyway, this is what they find. So you see here, these is like Smurfs. I don't know what these things are. These is people. So one detractor was like, oh well, these are just like models that they set up. Okay. So this white man got time to go all the way to the Congo. Right? He go all the way out to the Congo to create little miniatures, take pictures of the miniatures, and then forget and then lose the film for 80 years. Just for us to find it now and for us to look at that and see what. So these like action figures, that's what you're saying? Okay. The world is a lot stranger than we are even willing to admit in order to keep a sane view of what they tell us the world is. But it's not that. We just see it as that because we live with them, or they live with us, or they live on top of us, or whatever it is. But essentially, this stuff like this is proven, like I said, everything that they got from us, or people that look like us. And that the technology that people like us had so off the ripter that, they had to give it back to us in the form of entertainment. As you remember, most of the UFO and all that shit started after the 1950s, after the 50s and the 60s, right? After I told everybody what was going to happen with the military industrial complex. Who was another black man. Y'all, everybody know Eisenhower was black. So-called melanated skin. So I don't know what this is. This is a giant anteater, giant aardvark. Like, what is this? So you got to look at it like this. Like conspiracy theories are just like spoiler alerts. You know what I'm saying? They just like it's like a year, 2 year spoiler alert. That's what a conspiracy. Because they're all true.
Just came out that the FBI has been paying all of the tech companies to censor all of our text, all of our speeches, and then at the same time allow them to sell the data and all of that shit to China and all else they want. So they came out with a tweet and said, no, we wasn't doing that. We was sending them money in compensation for the time that they took to do what we asked them to do. So, so you did what I just said. So you see what I'm saying? As long as you have that type of situation, assault on language and ideas, this is where this stuff comes from. That's why this stuff seems so fantastic. But this shit is regular to our people. Regular or not, though, it's real. You know? So ultimately, what was happening was they were out there targeting him, targeting different so-called leaders and stuff because they needed to prepare because they knew that the one that they had heard about was going to come. If he came, then that would be a wrap for them. So somewhere in 1955, around, I think right after what happened to Patrice Lumumba, blessed the day. Right after they started hearing about this Christian dude who was coming through and he was doing like miracles. Like he was helping people, he was healing people, he was levitating, he was turning, water to, bread, all types of crazy. So they sent people down there because, they still had their slaves down there. It was blacks, black Europeans who was posing as Congolese and stuff like that, based upon what we discussed earlier. And they came across this dude, Simeon, I think it's Simeon Takia, or something like that. His first name's Simeon, like the tribe. And they sent people to go get him because of how many people his message and the power and the mystery was spreading. And this is around the same time the civil rights movement and stuff is popping off in America. So they got that psyop running and whatever psyop they actually had running through the fake Congolese national running the opposition parties and stuff at the time, but they couldn't have this. So they went and eventually tried to have a meeting with him. He didn't want to do it, but he wound up going. And then at the meeting, he was bound, gagged, shot. And they buried him in some water. Throw him in the ocean. So then about 4 hours later, they hear this dude coming back, hear about this dude in the local tavern telling the people about what had just happened to him. And that he was all good. And, he is a representative of the power of our ancestors and God and all of this stuff and how, we need to repent and get ready because, we all have this type of power. So they waited for him to come out, bagged him up, took him to a rendition site, did the same thing, beat him up. This time, allegedly cut him up, threw different pieces in the ocean, same thing. Next thing you know, a couple of days later, he pop up again. And they like, yo, what's going on? You could check this out. It's like documented stuff. And they was like, nah. So allegedly this got up to the Rothschild, to the heavy people, to the Paranisi or the Nisi and these type of demons. So they like, nah, we got this really might be him. So we really gotta really make this thing happen. So they went and they was able to abduct him again, abducting him. This time cut the heart out, cut his whole heart out. They said while his heart was out, they said he was looking at these niggas and telling these niggas, why did you cut my heart out? What do you think you're going to gain from all this? Like he's talking to these niggas, bleeding and all of that, but not dead. So eventually, again, they said they killed him. Again, allegedly cut his head off. Did the same shit they did. Tried to burn him, all of that. A couple of days later, here he is. This is him right here showing you the cuts. This is him, this picture on the left, he's showing you the cut where this shit happened. And all of that. This is why these Africans believe in this shit today. So we'd be like, oh, these Africans, they so stupid, they into this Christian healing, this magic shit. No, because this was a real story. People all over the continent was coming to hear Simeon. Simeon was putting it down to the point where little traces started coming back over here, where so-called black evangelicals were starting to hear about this thing. It was like, nah, we can't have that. So they finally bagged them up, brought them to the main devils. The main devils had a ritual killing of him performed again. With all this against his will. But he going through it. They do the whole shit. They see him not die. They seal him with the regenerative healing and all of that. And they like, now remember, around the same time is around the time they lucked up on the Henrietta Lacks stuff. Remember? Around the same time, the Henrietta Lacks stuff started coming out. They started finding out all this Star Wars metachlorian shit in the DNA of her because she had descended from them Lumbee and Wampanoag people who had interbred and never married outside the family, being that her grandmother and great grandfather then was princes of Lax County. They used to own the county, but they were like inbred Egyptian types. So again, Simeon, all of this is happening around the same time. So now they bugging. They like, yo, this is like a body of them. This is groups of them now, manifesting in different parts of the world. CIA then developed a program. This program is Project X-Men, or what they call Project X. You look all this shit up. So finally, Simeon come back to life. This nigga come back to life again. You know what I'm saying? Again. And then it's like, look, I see y'all really don't want me to be here. So I'm gonna go back to who and how I came. You know what I'm saying? To the people I came from. But just know this, all of these people around you, most of them got the same abilities and stuff that I do. And then when me and my people really do come back, and you haven't changed the situation that you helped put them in, it's over for everybody. And bounce, drop the mic and bounced. And nobody ever heard from Simeon again. And thus, programs like MK Osha, MK Naomi, right? The Tuskegee experiments, right? All of this stuff started coming into being. At the same time, being that the energy, the stuff that they was receiving from this, from all of the stuff that they had taken from the Kikuyu tribe to Queen Elizabeth, right? They now was putting all of that into the mythology, starting with the Black Panther. Which the mythology translated now into an actual movement of the same name. So like I said, think about these people and the time frame and what they dealing with and how many programs they got running because they scared that this whole thing is going to come into existence. So we need drugs. You see what I'm saying? We need more situations, more things to help dissuade all of this, to help negate all of this. You understand? This is a great illustration of the vibrational pattern that they got everybody. and then next to it, is an image of liberty from the people in Italy as a representation as to how they see us, the original people here in America. So as you see, like I told y'all, the chakra system is inverted. Yeah. And as you can see, Lady Liberty has this aspect on, the orange jumpsuit, because the orange represents one of the lower chakras, see, that they have everybody tied to, because it's the one right above the red, which again represents the root chakra. So if you put the root chakra, which is the lower power center, at the top, there's no place for the top to go because it's trapped in a loop, bringing itself back into a state opposite of its natural function, which then inhibits whatever you have naturally within you that functions properly. Under this new guise of what humans are, they're basically trying to make it seem like everybody is born broken. That's not true, man. It's not true. Everybody is not born with some crazy debility or disability or debilitating phobia that is imposed on them. Where any little thing that you fear, they try to amplify to such a degree that you believe that the fear is you, all to inhibit the actualization of who and what you really are, which is a free being outside of time, the way that they have generated it around us. Well, we don't know. Well, I mean, we know, but you understand. Yeah, it was Simeon, something, Simeon with a T, last name with a T. Yes, Toko. Thank you, bro. Thank you, brother Brian. Yeah, Toko. Trying to see if I had any more of those Congo things. Oh yeah, this is an etching of a city they found out there. Deep buried behind the bush and all of that. They make it seem like, again, like they had no real culture outside of that. But when you look at their actual uh, culture, it seems like they actually made pictures of their extraterrestrial civilization out of the fauna itself. Understand what I'm saying? Like instead of drawing pictures, it's like they grew the vegetation, or the vegetation grew around the actual mechanism or machine that is depicted. Like, look at this. This looks like a ship. This looks like a planet. Planet. It's landing. Here's the city, right? Here's the others, the city under the city with the next ship, the next joint. This actually looked like a spaceman suit. Like This was a suit that somebody got out of and then just left it there. This right here looked like a space shuttle. And this right here looks like the launching pad. Like this is the launching pad. This is the area around it. We're not bugging. You see it, right? And that's the thing. All of that stuff over here looks like that. Like we got stuff that's look just like this. It's just buried under a bunch of dirt. Can't see it. We walking on top of this shit all the time. They'll never tell us. We used to see stuff like that in Prospect Park all the time. Mm-hmm. Most likely. Yeah, that's the main thing. So the history allows them or allows us to then partake in their version of what happened or get caught up in expressing that to them. You know what I'm saying? Like always having to defend who we are as individual people and who we are is immaterial to how long we've been who we are. Last week, like I said, I showed you how the genealogy of the original man go back over 380,000 years. Most so-called paleontologists or so-called ethnologists and stuff say that mankind or modern man has only been cognizant for 150,000 years. This is what he's saying. The white man's saying. So if we got a patrilineal ascendancy, a descendancy, going all the way back 380,000 years that we could verify. So if he's saying 380,000, I'm saying 500,000. And if you're saying 500,000, then you might as well just say there's no record. You understand? Because you can't fathom 500,000 years. You can't fathom 500,000 years. It's hard for people to fathom the new year. 500,000 years, you know how long that is? And that's not even a long time. You know what I'm saying? It's long to us, but it's not really in the scope of the fact that your father, that means if you're a son, okay, that means every man in this class right now, put it in this context. Every man in this class right now, if you can trace, if they found a so-called melanated man in South Carolina with the DNA that go back over 380,000 years, which I'm rounding up. I'm rounding it up to 500,000, right? But to be modest with these people, right? With these people and their little stories, let's say, go by what they say, right? That means you've been alive longer. You can trace your lineage from you and your father all the way back to when before people, modern people, the way that we see them today, existed. And that means that that ancestor had the ability to look back now from his time all the way back to who knows when forever. And then if we in debunking the brought from Africa thing, that means then that he was the original man on all continents. And it bears out with the data, the research. Just because it's so-called phenotypically a demographic now, a so-called racial demographic now, which really doesn't exist, but let's say it does, because it does now, it doesn't mean that those were the founders of that place. The way that you know that the modern day Egyptians aren't the ones who were the so-called ancient ones, beyond the obvious pictures on the wall that they haven't gotten to and lightened up. Beyond that, they are all Islamic now. All of them, most of them. And even the ones that's not is practicing one of the three Abrahamic religions that allegedly started in this place called Egypt, that wasn't officially called Egypt until 1913 or something. And in Islam, it says that you are supposed to venerate your honored dead, especially if they're your ancestors. You do not go and disturb them. It's not like in Indonesia in these West Papua New Guinea countries where they'll like go and dig up their ancestors every 5 years and sit with them and talk with them shit. Like that's haram in Islam. So if that's the case, and all of these people that's there is doing it. Like when you go to the mosque, for instance, you go to the mosque, it's all clean. You go to the library, it's basically all clean. The museum is clean. It's no riffraff. It's no people out there doing whatever. When you go to the pyramids and the sites and all that, it's niggas hustling. It's niggas smoking cigarettes, hashish and shit. It's niggas out there trying to sell fake mummies. You know what I'm saying? They digging up people. They digging up the mummies and driving them down the avenue. They cutting them up. I told you they used to make painting like Picasso, Van Gogh, Matisse. Who else? Um, um, these niggas used to use mummy red in their paintings, which means they was using real mummies. These people used to eat them. These people used to eat mummies, especially they was bringing them off the boats to do the hard labor for being sold at Saleh and all that. These things would go and they would eat the mummies. So how are you so Islamic and how are you so connected to your ancient ancestors and all of that? But your modern ancestors, you put in the ground and you leave them there. But your so-called ancient Egyptian ancestors that built the pyramids, you're willing to cut them up, put them under X-rays, take pieces of their flesh off, eat them, turn them into paint, crayons. It's cat. Like, they're lying. It don't have to be, if their actions prove that, if anything, they practice a form of idolatry and cannibalism. If that's your ancestors, then you, especially if that's your ancestors, then you cannibalize them. So again, that means when we read the first degree and who was the original man, the Asiatic black man, maker, owner, ruler of the planet Earth, father of civilization, God of the universe. God as a, not the German context, but in the transitional English context that we're using to describe a supreme being. And obviously he was of his DNA, our DNA, because this is our black daddy. This is all our so-called black daddy. Why? Because Y equals self. It was telling us in the lessons, telling us Y equals self. Over 250 million years. We're here. You start tracing us at least 385,000 years. Because the original document that I talked about over 10 years ago, that's why I'm bugging that they even bring the article out now again. But it said 385,000 years. So either way, they ain't lying about that. So then when you bring that in the greater context of us now as so-called Moorish peoples, or those of us with an identity as so-called Moors, then we fall into our primary position because we're not trying to be something else. However, there's such a thing as, what do you call it, class system in which we Moors and people like that got caught up in. And then that was used to allow the so-called mercenary races that were used to expunge us from power and allow them to move into a better position of genocide over us. And they literally become you. They literally become you. So when we talk about, let's say, the free whites, right, or the free white persons, we're not talking about so-called blacks, so-called whites. We talking directly about people that look just like us, which then puts us at the disadvantage because we're so used to looking at white as a skin color that was really a status quo created under administrative law at best, that we have lost focus of the fact that they didn't have any direct jurisdictional value over us. But the corporate aspect of money, see what I'm saying, allowed them to consolidate power in the so-called government. So these families that you see on the left sponsored the generations of free white persons, i.e., declared Moors and stuff after a certain period. You know what I'm saying? They basically sponsored them into getting into politics and stuff like that, which then allowed them to slant the laws for people who were coming from their territory to have more sway. And those people, being that they were European, brought with them their white slaves, their white mercenaries, right? They're cleaning out their jails of both black and so-called white prisoners. And the only place they can get work are on these so-called colonized plantations that they are now transfixed to. So just like we said before, all of that Congo stuff that we see there, that's how it was here. Look, this is how it used to look in 1900 versus 2022. And this is, again, us in America, so-called Europe, so-called Asia, replaced. Where they literally take over an aspect of what we were. Look at Yehudism, but being Hebrew. Where now, if people understand, you think that Jew and Hebrew is the same thing. And they not. They never were. But who made them see it like that? whoever gave them one of the three Abrahamic religions that we predate. You know what I'm saying? Like we predate all of it. You don't know what the religion was 385,000 years ago. But I bet you in the positive, it was based on love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. I bet you that. So I bet you we're closer to whatever the shit was than the rest of these people. See what I'm saying? So it wasn't so much that they gave up space. I think it's more we allowed them to marry into the families here to such a degree that once the wars did start and they did, marry in, that first generation child was like the first generation now that's being born here, yes, American, but at the same time has these aristocratic ties or want to be aristocratic ties to Europe. And thus they put them in certain schools, like the Moorish Indian Charity School that became Dartmouth College. See? To Europeanize these Americanized Moors so that way they adopt the free white persona over the natural persona or the natural identity of them being Moors, i.e., native so-called Indians to the land. See what I'm saying? And thus everybody gets put in this position to now try to be or emulate something else to get more political power to be able to do what they need to do. And like Europeans, instead of fighting their own battles because they brought all of that shit over here with them, right? They hire or use the serfdom European mercenaries because they used to dealing with them to fight against us, who are of the original republic, who have certain predications listed in the actual building of the state constitutions that forbid them from putting us into bondage so long as we stay true to our identity. Understand? So we never fell to no so-called Caucasian, no white people, and all of this stuff that they keep talking us in. Remember, United States for America, i.e. America itself, Islam. Dartmouth College color is green. You're right, Mo. It was set up to disassociate us from our original position. And then others who weren't originally from here are now put into our place as the reservists. You understand? This is a perfect example of the different types Anybody have any questions while I get this on? Yes. Heru as a placeholder for a combination of energies. However, that doesn't detract that there may have been a time where a zoomorphic being as such existed, based upon the historical records and stuff that we have about, you know, giants and these ancient races that existed, blah, blah, blah. So that's why genetically they always want to inject us with something, pull blood out of something. I just showed this video a while ago of a guy, a white billionaire dude, who's sitting around a table around a bunch of brain dead black women and telling them how he's willing to pay them a couple of $1,000 to get aspects of their DNA, how great their DNA is, and how he needed, they need to get a piece of it. And they just all sitting around like not even hearing what this ghoul is telling them. Just looking at them like, okay, well, it's crazy, yo. It's really wild. So because people believe that where they are now is where they people always was, even though they wasn't the case, it's just the way that the modern society was reconstructed to make us believe that these people who live in Ukraine, because they look Caucasian and speak in this dialect, that's always who and what they were. That's not really the case. That's just who they are now, you see, based upon them being in this era. So let's look at it like this. Someone sent me this. This is a repost I think Hayes posted. I think he got it from knowledge stuff. I'm not sure. But this is an example I'm talking about. So here we got it. This is the more on the far left. Here we have the free white person, right? Next we have the black. And next we have the so-called American Indian. Okay? At the same time we have that, we have the Southeast Asian. / Indian, Samoan, Tongolese, so-called Hawaiian, whatever. See what I mean? Then we have another version of American Indian, so-called Ananuia, right? But under now the term Negro, see, slave. You see? So after they married into their families, married into the native families of the Moors who had land or whatever over here, going all the way back to the 1700s. Okay. Also, remember at the time we're speaking of, that country itself, that this is not really a, let me put it out for a second. All of this now, remember, these are the different countries. So these Moors, Morocco, Gibraltar, all of this is over here. Tripoli, all of this is over here. All of these so-called European places are all over here. So when we talk about the initial conflict as it popped off between these original people, you have these Europeans who, again, came over here under the Transportation Act, which was an act that was given to slaves, i.e. serfs, white people, mercenaries, as well as so-called black aristocrats, black so-called melanated intellectuals and stuff that were getting cleared out of Europe based upon the whitening of Europe at the time. And so coming over here, getting holdings, establishing businesses, marrying into the daughter of a Moor or the daughter of an American Indian, see, thereby producing seeds, raising those seeds under the European way, because these guys are still connected to their European roots based upon them coming from the families. Them coming from these so-called European families, and then from those families being brought together, see, they then impose themselves as free white persons who have native born children, and then bring them to these newly reformed schools to then educate them under the European way, to then get them into so-called Congress, so-called legislation as Republicans, see, which is the majority. Democrats that started with the mulatto Jefferson created the party out of that, but the party with the power was that. So ask yourself this: if blacks were slaves up until 1860, if blacks were slaves up until 1861, they were slaves till then. How is it that these people that we're seeing here on this document were actually senators in 1860? How were they senators at the same time that they allegedly were slaves? It don't make sense. Because this was the Reconstructive Party that had walked out and reformulated itself as remnants of the several states.
And so through their beneficial ownership, but because they were English or European in nature, they still, on one hand, honored the treaty with the Sultan and stuff, but on the other hand, was trying to set it up where they could perpetually get the land from those people that were no longer under the emperorship or the subjects of the emperor. Making you a state citizen able to run for legislature, which they did. So the Democrats who started the KKK started a subversive program to scare the so-called black Republicans into becoming Democrats, you see, through lynching. But initially, these were black people lynching other black people. The book Black Confederates talks about this. So the European whites started using them under positions to do that. Like I said, as mercenaries, and then reward them with aspects of the land, like renting. And then once they would get railroaded, literally out of the land, moved out, then another branch would come in, and then those that were the minority were now listed as black. See what I'm saying? Or undesirable or contraband. These were the ones who, again, may have been orphans, may have been brought over here and then not taken care of, whatever, and then just got thrown into the system and then wound up getting sold. And then because they didn't grow up with the same education that the free white persons had, they just grew up believing that they were niggas. They really are descended from those, let's say, black Portuguese that had been conquistadors that had been captured in the South and then been put generationally on plantations as prisoners of war. This is all in the book Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. And then after that, like I said, you get the so-called American Indian. This dude, who's now being replaced by the Siberians. See what I'm saying? Also, the free white persons, these dudes, can eventually have trading rights over the Moors. So the goal then becomes to make the Moors into blacks. But before you could make them blacks, they had to be American Indians. See? Because under Moors, he's under them. But as American Indians, now he's dealing with subordinate treatment. So once you take the white person out and look at him the way that you would look at black people calling the police on each other today, it takes the situation out and makes you see why it's so hard for so-called black people to trust each other. That's why, like I said, after the Reconstructed history, when the Reconstructed Republican Congress took hold again, they now had to set up situations where they could maintain power while annexing the old stuff and bringing everybody under the, the, the states, while the white people wanted to bring everybody under the district. See? And so when we walked out, they took that as a rebellion, which then allowed Lincoln to conscript them because the northern armies were technically fighting against the Romans, Vatican, who was backing up some of the aristocratic southern nobles. You know what I'm saying? People that were classified as Native Americans today are actually the Mongolian immigrants from the Altai Mountains of Siberia, near the Caucasus region of Russia. In 1854, the California Supreme Court classified Chinese immigrants as Indians to further confuse who the original Indians and stuff was. The same way they was already doing in England when they came up with trying to take over the Scottish line and the Irish people, Wales and all that. Because the word Macduff, Scottish means son, Macduff means son of a black man. So anything Mac is black. That's why David Ritchie, the author, went so hard, because he was being, at the time, somewhat ostracized because of his Moorish ancestry in going against the Reconstructionist history that was going across the so-called Western territories or colonies at the time. The word duff means dark complexion or to be dark skinned. So the Macduffs, the MacDougalls, the MacDonalds, the McDowells, the Micmacs, those are all European so-called clans, which technically is a made-up word too. So under the reconstructional aspect of stuff is why everything is so confused and why we think everybody in power is so-called Caucasian. Because that was the only way for them being the so-called black nobility or the so-called free white persons who became what we today would call the Boule and them people, to be able to do that. The so-called black and white Freemasons that work together. They are the ones working the ultimate play. Moorish people was the ones that allowed them to come into that. But technically, at the time of the Constitution, all of that, they were all subjects of the King of Britain. Remember, they were warring against him. Just like with the Meg Thee Stallion case, keep your eye on what was happening. Who were they rebelling against? Were they rebelling against the crown, or were they rebelling against George himself, who at the time was somewhat at war with the crown? Once they seceded,
he was able to be compensated. They were at war with George. That's why they agreed to pay George the money at Cornwallis. But remember, was not, George was the Christian king, but under the Islamic rule, he was seen as the Sultan of Rome. Remember? Of Rome and Palestine. But it said that the Sultan had jurisdiction of all the territories of the West, right? Let's see. Kenneth the Dove, who was the direct descendant of Frederick Douglass, right? The Black Glass, or the Black Mirror. Yeah, in the name of blah, 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 blah. Here go George in the turban with the diadem. What does it say? Thanks, uh, the Sultan, George III, Sultan of the territories of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Ireland, Duke of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. Mecklenburg is one of the key counties in North Carolina, named for his wife, right? So that way, if he attacked, he wouldn't attack a city. The people would be protected because he wouldn't attack the city that was named after his queen, which actually worked. The prince descended from the dynasty of the sultans of Rome and Palestine. Thus, George, who was a Christian king to his subjects, was a Moorish ruler to the other Moors that he was a consort with. Islam, which is why the Moors were a heavy fixture of the so-called British or European courts. Islam. Which is why the Christian kings under him tried to poison him. But because his queen was a botanist, she got her herbs from North Carolina, from the Moors that trade and triumph. It's used at the healing. To show more what I'm talking about, this is Pascal Beverly Randolph, kind of a colorized version. And on your left, excuse me, on your right, and then on your left is one of the Moroccan princes that helped free the territory during the war. The caste system created a hierarchy of social and racial divisions in New Spain. See? Because prior to that, there was no hierarchy other than under Sharifa law. Because under Sharifa law, everybody's a Moroccan that's in Moroccan territory. Moroccan with an A, and Moroccan with an O.
racial divisions in New Spain, where the Spaniards were at the top and the Africans and Indians were at the bottom. See, because prior to that, it was the reverse. The caste system's ultimate goal was to whiten the races. Regardless of the social and racial division implementation by caste system, the Africans couldn't prove their blood. By the ability for Africans to improve their social standing was partly due to the lack of enforcement of the caste system. See, they couldn't enforce it because everybody around them was the same. This is where the colorism came with black people. Why we on that shit today? But the Spaniards was basically us. The Africans and the so-called Indians was basically us, as you saw. This is a picture of the capital, allegedly, in 1875. As you can see, it's basically barren. This is right during or right after the so-called Civil War. Where's everybody at? Everything in terms of foundation is already built on everything that's already been. Everything was just kind of leveled out, it seems, at one point. And then, as we are told, Reconstruction happened. And from that point on, we've just been at the bottom. But that's only because they evolved themselves in the caste system that was invented or implemented by people in a sense that look like us. Which is why I think today it's so hard for us to trust one another. Why we think to being with another race is the way out. And that's the exact shit that got us here in the first place. Prior to integration, we all had our own stuff. Everybody had their own, whether rich or poor. And it was more so-called rich, so-called more than the opposite. So everything else is moving. So as we close, I'm going to show you this about the Rechabites. And it is not all surprising to encounter in every part of the desert race every survival of primitive Judaism, which at one point played an important role in the whole region of the Sahara from Senegal to the border of Somaliland, in which even in our day have been in the help of French occupation, all traditions which are everywhere found concerning the early Jewish history of this country. See, the northern kingdom of Israel is different than the southern kingdom of Judah. Then Judah, Levi, and I think Simeon is what consists of the people they refer to as the Jews, or the Yahud. And then out of the Yahud, you have those Gentiles who have converted, who become Jews, but they are not part of the nation of Judah. They're Israel. Excuse me, they're of a different race. Right? The Yahud Shabar, the so-called Rechab, a tribe of shepherds and agriculturalists, interpret horsemen who at one time camped on the shores of the Red Sea. So in ancient times, we know that the Red Sea is over here in California, real Red Sea, who finally crossed the Sudan and penetrated to the farthest points of the Sahara. To them, the Moorish natives, as well as the Arabs and Negroes, attribute the founding of the first empires, the erections of the first public buildings in the country, and the construction of the first canals and irrigation systems, and the institution of the social and economic regime that still survived in the Saharan community. So when you do your DNA, for those of you who have done your DNA, there's a certain portion of it that comes up sub-Saharan, right? Right? Anybody that's done that, I'm sure if you were born in America, something came up and said sub-Saharan DNA, but there's a certain degree of sub-Saharan DNA. To make that clear, what this is in reference to is anything along the line of the sub-Sahara. Yes, Sahara, Sierra. That's why they don't want people going into the Grand Canyon and all of that, because that's leading allegedly all the way up into Western Africa, due to the fact, as we discussed last week, that all of the continents is basically right on top. Yeah, so that puts a plug in the whole so-called Jew thing, all of that. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, that when it says sub-Sahara, it's basically saying anything that's in the area or on the same level as with sub-Sahara is. Because again, at one point, land bridge, according to what we just showed 250 million years ago, of that 250 years, we can definitely count 385,000 years. They say 360, but the original joint I got said 385,000. So we go with that. So based on that, that means of that 250 million years, we can chart out at least 385,000 of that we was here doing our thing. So that leaves room for everything that we see as mythic or megalithic or all of that, us to be not only a part of it, most likely to be the progenitors or the inheritors of it, who have basically, as we can see in the Congo stuff, look like we just lost during this period of what this void century that they refer to as the 1800s, based on a calendar system that is flawed in their aspect, how they set it up, based upon them reconfiguring time and space around their agenda, which is to have us be the devils in this new reconstructed society that is now falling apart before our eyes. Yeah, so again, just like the Tory thing, the United States was at war with the Prince of the United States, who was George. But George himself, all his subjects were Christian, but he himself was actually Hebrew, you see, and he was also seen as a sultan by the other sultans who were running the world at the time. So, again, thank you guys for coming through. Check out www.seacoast.com. If you haven't, you can go to Cash App to money sign capital.com, or through PayPal, gmail.com, as well as www.theorganics.com. You can check that out. Check out my Rumble if you haven't already, as well as the YouTube joint. We have 46,000 now. That's cool.
Inshallah, we reach a 50. So definitely please share, subscribe, inshallah. Anybody have any questions? Anything else? Yeah, they all Muslims in secret. They all got bezels and stuff in the closet front, acting like we're bugging. Just like we saw last week, there's no way that you could be the head of the United States Republican Party and the year before that you was in chains. It just don't add up. And they were the majority. They were the majority, which means that the wicked blacks who were free whites used the poor whites as the window dressing. And so the white became the face or the master for the blacks who were willing to give up their estates to keep the other blacks, the other Moors of different um, clans and stuff to have their own stuff. To the point that Nigeria itself was named after her. See, before the name Nigeria was put forward in this area of Western Sudan, see, when we were talking about the Sudan, it had been known as the Niger Empire, and Niger Sudan, Central Sudan. The name Nigeria was first suggested in special articles on January 8th, on the prophet birthday. This chick, 1897, see, 1897, in the article in accordance to the transitions of the newspaper was published anonymously, but it was in fact written by Flora Shaw, who spent 8 years in the printing house square as expert on colonial affairs. She was a realtor. Later in 1902, she married Sir Frederick Looseguard, the High Commissioner of the Northern Nigerian Protectorate. See, she named it. So Nigerians, I don't know. I gotta figure that out. That's what I mean. How you gonna be free but you still taking Lady Flora name? But then you come over here and act like y'all better than us. But y'all take roles and different things on TV and stuff to act like us. We don't even really act like yeah, the counties and stuff like that can come back, but I would say, however, it would take everybody to be in proper person, and from that perspective, establish Article 3 section within that county that deals with that through the district court based on the ancestral protectorate that existed prior to the United States coming into existence. And then using that position to govern the public affairs for the private people. So whatever law, whatever thing they come up with, they can always go to that aspect of the court and get a summary judgment because they're coming in as constitutional representatives of the republic, who, as representatives of the several states, are also Moors in amity with Prince, in amity with the so-called United States in the ancient republic, which is also protecting us through our religious society as well as our trust setup through our old identity. We can be Republicans because we're representing the trusts, which are the estates or the state that we hold dear, that we hold self-evident. That is the birth certificate and everything associated with that. Now that we reach the age of majority, and thus being part of that, we're able to do that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like you have your tribal government, and then you have the ambassador section of that government that interfaces with the municipality around you. Because you're your own municipality, so you deal with them like a country would deal with another country. But to do that, you have to have
corporate entities that you can put in that country to do business through, so it's not you directly doing it. Those entities that you set up in that country, i.e. the LLCs and all of that, should have a corporate trust outside of the U.S. that proves the foreign aspect of the jurisdiction, which then coincides with you being a remnant of the several states, and thus being required a Republican form of government. Under the preamble to the 7th article, and then the supremacy clause of the Constitution, as well as the Bill of Rights and the Bill of Rights. And the treaties, excuse me. Article 3 would be the venue that whatever your tribal government brings to the public venue, which is the municipality, that's the venue that will be brought by you to it, instead of it functioning under the foreign jurisdiction that is functioning under when you're not there. That happens by doing it as a people, the same way you would do as a people if you're doing like a block vote to elect somebody. Your one vote as the leader of your people represents the 35,000 or 50,000 people. So then that gives you majority rule in whatever that politician or whoever is going to do. That's another way to do it. Moors don't do that. They try to do outside and all that, which is cool, but it's set up for you to almost be in combat with them when you do it like that. You gotta figure out the way to make them serve you. Is what I'm doing. Anything else? Yeah, we can do one on this next week. You know, instead of going against them and trying to force them and do all that, there's a corporate way to do that from the outside in. I'm seeing, and it's less hectic. It's more taking your stance and then bringing it to them. They can't really rule on it unless you bring it to them. But that's why you have an option. You can do it directly through that, or you can work through arbitration. So we'll get into that, inshallah. So again, thank you guys for sending in. Hit me up at houseofbell.com. Right? Peace.
Call his name.
Brother Aseer, he still here? Huh? Well, you need to bring him on in.
Go get him, please.
Yeah, because we always want to uphold these new speakers. And so last year, 2006, it was the introduction of Brother Rashid that came with the whole Kabbalistic concepts. Now we got another brother here that's lighting it up, and it's this brother Aseer. I want to get him on the camera. You know, I want to get that photo op with this Negro. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? You know, and you know, I want to get that photo op and stuff like that because
That's right.
Because we sent his stuff up to Canada. And they eating it up, man. I want to get that. You know how you do that. What's up, brother? We want to let you know, man. You know, you came out smoking, and that's great, man. That means, you know, that the legacy continues, and it's on, man. You know, it's on. And I'm going to tell you.
They selling them up in Canada?
Oh, man, we sent the tapes. We got the tapes down in Atlanta, and they loved them. And so we sent them up to Canada. And so the group up in Canada is all in their early 20s. So, you know, they the testosterone crowd.
Right.
And so they was loving it. They was loving it. So they was like, yo, man, can you get in touch with him and stuff? I said, well, hell, I'm trying to get in touch with him myself. So we can get you on up to Canada and stuff, you see. And also, man, so it's cool. If you haven't seen the brother, some dynamite stuff, you see what I'm saying? Now, you brother Rashid opened for me. These new people are coming and stuff like that. You know, we got a couple of people on the frequency, but this is the new edition of the hot shit. You know what I'm saying? The new version of the blank. Yeah. So if you haven't seen the brother, you need to get some of his tape. His brother Aseer.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Brother, sister.
You see. So y'all did with that. And the brother's a musician. We heard some of his music today. And all of that. So, you know, we want to pump some of that out. Like I said, the brother Rashid, it opened for me. Want to get some of his stuff. We still got people on the frequency. Like I said, brother Aseer, you know, a hard hitter. That's been out here and stuff, you know. So, want to support any kind of information we get. Now, going back to this physical world, the physical world.